Hi BookTube, I am here today to film a discussion video. There will be mild Game of Thrones and Girl with the Dragon Tattoo references, so if you don't like that, you can just skip through it. Yes, so this is a response video to RJ over at The Secret Stacks. I will link his video down below. He had a really great video, I want to get the exact title right, responding to cultural relativism and difficult subjects in books. And he also mentions the TV show Game of Thrones. And he was very thoughtful and articulate about his thoughts, but I just wanted to, well, there was, well, I was too lazy to type it all out in a comment, and there was a lot I wanted to say about this subject because I've thought about it a lot, so I decided to film my own video. When talking about cultural relativism, I mean, obviously, again, what it means is that, you know, some cultures have different values of what's right and what's wrong, and particularly in historical societies, when we talk about either fantasy, sort of medieval-like fantasy, like Game of Thrones, or in more historical fiction, like, I don't know, Pillars of the Earth, or Ken Follett books, or lots of other historical fiction books. Common critique is, particularly with Game of Thrones, is that there is far too much violence, but particularly sexual violence, and in particular against women. And people oftentimes respond to that by saying this was normal for the time. And that's something that I really want to address because I am quite passionate about this topic, so I will be ranting. But this is something that I think needs to be handled delicately, because obviously we can't ignore parts of our history that is uncouth or unacceptable. Like, we don't, like, for example, take the movie 12 Years a Slave, which is devastating and brutal. We need to show what it's like, and we need to show the violence against Black people, because if we don't, we are diminishing the suffering that they have endured, and I think that's important. But there's a difference between portraying it accurately, based off of a historical account, and fictionalizing continual characters, and perpetuating violence against them. My problem in particular with let's look at Game of Thrones violence for this example, is that people say, oh, it's historically accurate, yada, yada, yada. Well, first of all, it is a fantasy society. I have read the books by George R.R. Martin, and I have watched the show up through season 5. But, and one thing actually that I've noticed is that the show is, first of all, much more pornographic and much more violent than almost even than the original A Song of Ice and Fire books. And, I watched the first few episodes of season 1 before I started reading the books, what was it, 3 or 4 years ago? So I wasn't expecting that. I was expecting, you know, like, more swearing and naked people, but surprisingly, the books are more, are cleaner, so to speak, than the show. And, so the first claim I'm going to address is that it's history and we shouldn't be forgetting history. I mean, that's partially true. Again, as I said, we shouldn't forget where we've come from or try to sanitize history, because I think that's forgetting how far we've come, and that's a dangerous, like, slippery slope. But at the same time, though, the way that Game of Thrones is doing it is picking the pieces of history that they want to, and not, again, my problems are more with the show. Like, for example, men in medieval times and in ancient times were raped. Not as frequently as women, but for example, Roman soldiers would walk the battlefield of slain soldiers and rape the foreign soldiers. And that is so hideous. But we don't ever, like, there is one character on Game of Thrones in 5 seasons that I've seen, and again, I've only seen through 5 seasons, who's gotten raped. Do you know how many female characters have gotten raped and been threatened of rape compared to one male character? So, first of all, like, again, violence against women is much more often, so it's much more common to ignore the parts of history that are violent toward, the sexual violence towards men, because we don't like to see it and because we're uncomfortable with it. And one sort of, like, awakening moment I had is, I also am a fan of the series Outlander in addition to A Song of Ice and Fire, and I've read 4 of the books and watched the first season. And so this isn't really a spoiler, but one of the main characters, who is a man, gets raped in Outlander. And this takes place in the 18th century. And I remember watching it and reading it and feeling so... I can't even describe it, because I was so disgusted and I was so, like, traumatized by his trauma. And I remember feeling so upset by it. And then I thought, why am I more upset by watching this male character getting raped than I am by the dozens upon dozens of female characters? It's the same thing. And it's because violence against women is so much more normalized that we don't even react to it anymore. It's part of life. It's part of media. And my main problem, aside from the depictions of violence, is, in addition, the way that it's eroticized in particularly Game of Thrones. Like, this sort of camera angles or the music and whatnot will makes it seem pornographic in the way that their female actors are almost continually completely naked, where male actors almost never are, and it's pornographic. And if you look at sort of like the demographics of who is watching Game of Thrones now, they're not watching it for the incredibly intricate plot lines that so many of the fans of the books have read. They're watching it because they like to see people's heads lopped off and hot naked women. And I think that's a problem, because I think the majesty of George R.R. Martin's books is because it's basically a political thriller. It's this beautifully dark, terrifying society, but because the society is terrible, but the people are complex, and that's the thing. There isn't good or evil characters. Everyone is just caught up in this huge, giant mess. And yeah, so these were some of my thoughts on the subject. And again, I'm not arguing that we should sanitize history and pretend that everyone in medieval times were just walking around, running through fields of daisies, and knights in shining armor were climbing up princesses' hair to rescue them. But there is a way to portray violence accurately, and there's a way to not do it. And most modern media is not doing it the right way. If you have to rape one of your female characters because she needs motivation or because she needs to feel strong, you do not understand sexual assault. If you need to, if you need to make it edgy, you do not understand sexual assault. If you are doing this to make it seem, or one thing that bothers me the most, if you are raping or threatening to rape a female character because a male protagonist needs motivation, that's the worst offense of all, because you are taking away the female character's story and her autonomy and her reaction to her own assault. And one way that I think, one series that has done this well is The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, by Stieg Larsson. I have only read the first book and haven't seen the movies, but I'm currently trying to get around to reading the other ones. But that series does cover sexual assault, and the US title is The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, but hold on, let's see. I actually have it right here. This is the this is the Dutch version, but this actually really, it does cover sexual violence against women, and it does it in a very complex, unrelenting way. And I think it is possible, but it's harder to do that because you have to listen to men and women's stories about sexual assault. And it's not fun to watch a character being depressed and trying to commit suicide for 6 months after this. It's not fun. It's not edgy. But it's something that you owe to characters, because if you can't take cop-outs on this, because that contributes to rape culture and that contributes to everything. And I just think people don't realize, screenwriters or whatever, don't realize that a lot of them are, white men and who have never been threatened with sexual assault or have never really had to think about it. And because of that, they are, not intentionally, but they are making dangerous assumptions, and that permeates the way that we view the world. And so that's why it's important that we challenge them to get it right. Because when your job is to create characters that are realistic in a fantasy world or in a sci-fi world or whatever world it is, even if it's our own, you have to get them right. It's literally your job. And yes, so and yet you do have to write complex female characters and complex non-white characters and complex homosexual characters. And George R.R. Martin does this, but yet somehow it didn't quite translate into television. That being said, I did really enjoy the first few seasons of the show, but I can't even watch it anymore because it's so traumatic, and I can't, not even the heads being lopped off, not even, the reason why I liked seeing the violence before was not because I was like, oh yeah, you know, he got stabbed in the eye, but it confronted the realities of death, and it confronted the realities of, if you kill someone, this is what it is like. And it shocked people, because we're used to seeing, you know, the censored versions where someone stabs someone else in the gut and the sword comes away clean, and the person just magically falls. But this is what death is really like. But the problem, and it was new, and that's why people were astounded. But now, you know, what is it, 5 years later since the show aired, 3? We've become sanitized to that version. So they're resorting to more and more and more and more violence, because we just aren't shocked anymore. Yeah, so I've kind of ranted a bit. I know that these are just my thoughts on the subjects. I knew that I couldn't put all of this into one comment, so if you have similar thoughts, please let me know. Everyone, please be civil in the comments, and because be aware that, you know, so many people are assault survivors, and you know, it's obviously, we can respectfully disagree, and I'm not too worried because BookTube is amazing, but yeah, let me know what you think about the subject, and if anything that I said, if you agree or disagree with anything that I said. I know I rambled a bit, but I just had to get this all off my chest. Again, thanks to RJ from the Secret Stacks for posting his video with quite articulate comments. This is approaching 13 minutes now, so I better end it while I still can. So I'll see you guys all next time. Doei!